Have you ever tried to explain to someone who dreams of sailing around the world that their favorite yacht actually isn't suitable for a circumnavigation? It's like trying to tell a Harley-Davidson fan that their bike has weight distribution issues. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I have a similar motorcycle myself and experience in conversations about how, although Harley is a legend, it's not really the best technical solution. But to be honest, it's actually crap. And now, imagine yourself standing on board the Bali Catspace. It seems like a catamaran just like any other. There are sails, there are cabins, it even seems to have a bow. But as soon as you start to look closer, things start to get weird. I understand that all such statements are debatable by their very nature, because what's normal is simply what you're used to. And to say that people still haven't gotten used to this by 2025, well, I can't say that for sure. However, in any case, there are catamarans that are just catamarans, and then there's Bali. Well, you get what I'm going to be ranting about today. Hello, friends. My name is Kirill Shelukin, and today we're going to take a look at one of the most controversial catamarans of recent years, namely the Bali Catspace. The model is recent, but not brand new. It was launched just a few years ago, but has already become a legend. Though among charter brokers, it's more of an anti-hero, especially for those who dream of crossing the Atlantic on something tried and true and sturdy. Let's take a look at why that is. We're definitely going to figure it out now, and for that we're going to spend a bunch of your time. As for those who prefer dry reviews without any analysis, well, this is clearly not the place for you. I start to get bored when I'm just reciting numbers. So the Bali Catspace is Katana Group's attempt, the owner of the Bali brand, to create a catamaran for everyone except athletes. For beginners, for charters, for those who love bright interiors and don't like to strain themselves. But in reality, what came out was a catamaran with a distinctly strong character, like a person who shows up in a national football jersey in wedding photos instead of, say, a suit. So it's kind of one of us, but with its quirks. First of all, it's a shorty by charter standards, of course, just 12.3 meters. But on the water, it feels like you're in a four-room apartment that has just been placed right onto this deck. And all of this is thanks to Bali's signature feature, an open bow area with a solid platform instead of a net. And of course, there's this convertible salon that merges with the cockpit thanks to a garage-style door that lifts upward. There is currently no access to the bow from the salon, but we'll talk about that later and explain why. As for the impressions of those who have been on this little one, they are literally split into two camps. One is, wow, it's so bright and comfortable. And the other is, what is this? A bus on water. And honestly, these opinions don't overlap at all. And of course, both of these opinions are valid. You just need to know from which perspective to look at all of this. Honestly, I always start talking about Bali with my favorite little details. And here's one of the features I personally respect them for. This rear lifting garage door. It's also a door, it's also a transformer, and it's the favorite button of all lazy captains like me, because you can just sit at the outdoor table in the evening. You've had a good time, some wine, conversations, the kids have already run off to the cabins, and then attention, you realize you need to clear everything away: glasses, bread, leftover pasta, napkins, phones, glasses, books. I could think of plenty more things too. And then you have to wipe down the table, straighten the tablecloth, and God forbid if it rains or gets damp or windy, everything just goes flying. No one ever feels like doing all that in the evening. And so as a loving captain, you start going through all those motions. But on the Catspace, you don't have to do any of that. You just press a button, the motor hums, bam, and you're inside the salon. That's it. Now it's not outdoors anymore, it's officially a living area. And from the outside it all looks neat and, well, yacht-like, you could say. And it doesn't matter what's on the tableau, no one can see it. And in the morning, whoever wakes up first will quietly tidy everything up. It's a real pleasure for the charter captain, and for everyone else too, by the way. No one bothers them in the evening, you just close it up and say, alright, that's it for today, relax. And honestly, that's a brilliant psychological touch. You don't have to finish dinner and clean up all traces of life. You just walk away as if your boat has a terrace with a retractable roof. And of course, when it suddenly gets windy outside, it starts to rain, or it just gets dark, you can easily turn the cockpit into an extension of the salon in just a couple of seconds without any fussing around with canopies, curtains, zippers, and all that other stuff that's so annoying on other catamarans. By the way, there's a question I ask myself every time I see it. Why did they name it Catspace anyway? Honestly, if you ask me, it sounds much more like the name of an inexpensive run-of-the-mill cat shelter rather than that of a 12-meter luxury yacht. Seriously. Catspace, it's as if Lagoon, for example, named their boat something like Sea Room or Ocean Loft. A lot of air, not much substance. Well, those are the jokes for today. Alright, enjoy! And I'll tell you a bit about the evolution of this model. It really took off after the Bali 4.1. Yes, it's the 4.1 that's the prototype. Although the 4 is basically the same concept. They were more like merged together. But those who say that the Bali 4 was the prototype for the Bali Cat Smart clearly don't understand why that model was created in the first place. That's exactly why I have a long video specifically about the cat smarts and about how Bali destroyed the idea of catamarans for so-called pseudo-sportsmen and then ended up jumping into that niche themselves. It's really interesting there too, so I recommend checking it out. In the meantime, let me remind you that the Bali 4.1 is basically an outdated Catspace. That one was good, but over the years it accumulated a critical mass of negative user reviews, and as far as we know, it was with this brand that the conceptual decision was made not to abandon the market, but to match it as closely as possible. That's exactly why I chose Bali as a brand and did the following thing. That's actually why, as a brand, I like them the most. If there's a problem, they improve it, change the model, and make it so that no one would even think to read reviews about the original version. New one is, so to speak, as different from the original as possible. They live and breathe this market. I'm talking about Bali. They don't just occupy a niche simply because they were there from the start. They truly breathe this market, feel it, and know where to move next. And really, if you compare Bali to others, it's a whole different kind of pleasure. I understand that for representatives of this brand, badmouthing competitors or praising themselves at their expense is just not appropriate. But first and foremost, I'm a blogger, and my job is precisely to express my opinion. And I definitely have one. For example, let's take the Lagoon 40. At first glance, it looks, well, more like a catamaran, you could say. The lines are softer, the shapes are smoother, all the zones are separated. It kind of says, I'm a catamaran for yachting, not for relaxation. But what do we see today? It noticeably falls short of the comfort that clients are looking for. Where's the flybridge? Why is the passage to the salon so narrow? What do you do in bad weather? With the Catspace, you just feel like you're in an aquarium. With a flybridge, you're always in a safe zone. But with the Lagoon, it's more like a little house in the woods, isn't it? Yes, with designer renovations maybe, but open to all the winds. Let's move on. Fountaine Pajot with their Astrea 42. Now, this is almost business class. It's a mature, well-balanced boat with a bit more displacement and proper porosity. But again, the width and layout of the salon make it feel less airy. The Catspace feels more spacious, even though it's smaller on paper. And that matters when you have family, friends, a dog, and lots of suitcases on board. And finally, let's take the Leopard, a tried and true ocean charter catamaran. Yes, I'm not a big fan of it because of some critical little things, although in reality it's an honest, solid ocean-going cat. The sails are bigger, the beam is sturdier, and the balance is more precise. You can head to Cape Verde or Panama on it with a clear conscience. Inside, everything is practical, but there's no real inspiration, you could say. The Catspace loses to all of them in terms of seaworthiness, but wins when it comes to the feeling it gives you. That's it. I want to leave, and for 90% of users, that's the main criterion. Here's where an important point comes in. Everyone has their own use case. Some people won't dream even of sailing across oceans, some want to live at anchor in a beautiful bay, and others want to rent out the boat for charter and earn passive income. Or you can simply go out with friends for the weekend and grill shrimp in the forward cockpit under the stars, and never use that catamaran for anything else. That's why I'm not just talking about boats here. I actually help people choose a catamaran for their specific needs, budget, country of operation, flag type, and even personal quirks. Do you like a mainsail with a square top? Okay. Needs soundproofing, air conditioning in every cabin, and teak on the flybridge? Well, we'll figure it out. Are you afraid of seasickness? Well, so am I, for example. We'll find an option where you'll feel less seasick. All of this comes not from theory, but from practice. My team has handled dozens of selections, configurations, and consultations. We sit down together, discuss your goals, route, budget, plans, and only then do we make a choice. And what's important is that I'm not tied to any particular brand. What matters to me is that you truly enjoy it. Because a good catamaran isn't the most expensive or the trendiest one, it's the one you don't want to leave for a hotel. So if you're seriously thinking about buying, write to me and we'll discuss everything. I'll help you through this process and save you a ton of time, money and nerves, because making a mistake with a catamaran is expensive, but finding the right one for you, let's say, is priceless. Let's get back to the Catspace. The design of the Catspace, of course, is an acquired taste, but there are more and more people in the world who appreciate it. Their signature style is all about being boxy, straightforward, with right angles and flat surfaces. If Lagoon was designed by an artist with an architectural background, then Catspace was probably created by an engineer with a degree in automated design systems. But Bali has its own distinct character. You definitely won't confuse it with other catamarans. The forward lounge area without a net and the aft garage style door. These are two primary distinguishing features that no one else on the market has. It's like a boat made for relaxation, not for showing off or for speed. Sit down, sunbathe, and don't make a fuss. Inside, everything follows pretty much the same vibe. And honestly, sometimes it's hard to believe you're actually on a boat. Light tones, everything is straight-lined, glossy, and easy to clean. minimalism with an office touch and quality renovation. The kitchen is separate, looking more like a restaurant section than a galley. Even if you don't really know how to cook at all, you'll genuinely want to try frying something yourself, just to see for yourself how the whole process actually works in practice. Actually, I really liked how it was designed in the old Bali 4, when all the kitchen surfaces just faced forward, and there wasn't this kind of partitioned area that some sellers now call a bar counter. But here, well, you can see they definitely tried to make it look more trendy and modern. There's a separation of zones, like in an apartment. Like here we cook, there we sit, over there we look out the window and discuss investments. That appealed to me a bit less, I guess. Although, yeah, I'm not the standard. On yachts, I'd rather skip the food and get a chance to steer, raise the sail, or fix something. So judging by my own preferences is probably risky. After all, manufacturers are mostly targeting the average charter client. And if the kitchen looks stylish, is separated from the salon, and people are buying it, then it means everything is done right. Now let's dig into the sailing characteristics and figure out how this boat handles and why it is the way it is. The sail plan is a standard Bermuda sloop, mainsail, jeep, and there's no need to buy anything else because there's really no point. Although, of course, there is an option for code 0. In reality, on the Catspace, the entire sail plan is like an automatic transmission in a family crossover. It works, doesn't get in the way, and doesn't require any deep philosophical thought. The mainsail is raised with an electric winch, and the jib is self-tacking. Everything is designed so that someone who charters the boat for a week and is seeing this jib up close for the first time in their life won't get into trouble. This is absolutely in line with the modern concept of a cruising boat, as simple and clear as possible, and forgiving even the most foolish mistakes. And this, by the way, is where the hidden danger lies, because the longer you sail on these catamarans, the more a false sense of security develops. All stable, all steady, you don't care about wind or waves. The helm doesn't get ripped out of your hands. Well, it doesn't get stuck anywhere either. Yes, at some point even I realized that modern captains don't know what broaching is. A catamaran really behaves like a big hotel with autopilot, and it's clear that with this kind of incredible comfort all around you, you start to forget that you're actually out at sea, and as everyone knows, the sea doesn't forgive mistakes. You could draw a lot of analogies, but for me the most accurate one is with motorcycles. It's like if you were always driving on the highway going 120, 150 on cruise control, and then you decided to turn onto a winding mountain road. And right on the very first curve, you suddenly realize that you don't feel the motorcycle at all and can't accurately judge your speed, your lean, or your grip on the road. That skill, which seemed stable to you, was actually just a comfortable illusion. It's the same here. As long as you're strolling around Croatia with a glass in hand and using a bow thruster, everything's fine. But as soon as you encounter real wind, serious waves, and docking in tight spaces, that's when the real practice begins. And by the way, it's far from always pleasant, especially if you weren't prepared for it in advance. That's why I always say, if you want to sail not just around Greece with music playing and a gentle breeze, you need practice. And not just going through it a couple of times, but practicing consciously working on maneuvers, understanding the weather, and handling the boat in different conditions. Nowadays, almost every yachting school offers catamaran practice as well. Look for it, reach out, because knowing how to set a code 0 is great, but it's even better to know how to take it down in time. But let's get back to the sails. On board we have a mainsail with an area of 45 square meters and a self-tacking jib of 30 square meters. And essentially that's enough for 90% of the conditions where this boat will be sailing. Start the engine, leave the marina, press a couple of buttons, and your sails are already set. No need to run to the bow, no need to worry about the boom sheet. It's really beginner friendly. And if you want a bit more speed, you can set, for example, a code 0 or even a Jenica. The code 0 has 65 square meters, and it really helps in light winds. But it's important to remember, the Catspace is not a racing boat. It won't accelerate to 10 knots under a jib in 15 knots of wind. It was designed with the idea of moving along somehow, but without stress. And in this sense, it's perfect for the Mediterranean climate, where you have calm in the morning, a breeze during the day, and calm and stillness again in the evening. Complex sails aren't necessary. They don't fit this philosophy. And the rigging here matches that approach. There are no unnecessary adjustments, only what you need to sail and drink coffee. Now let's talk about the engines. The Bali Catspace comes standard with two Nanian 3.21 diesel engines, each producing 19.6 horsepower. It's honest mechanics without a common rail electronic fuel system, just mentioning which already makes my tongue twist and sends everyone into a real cold sweat, honestly, truly. And now let me repeat once more. 20 horsepower. Honestly, this is something I just can't keep quiet about. 20 horsepower per hull. Are you serious? Is this an engine from a lawnmower for a super yacht or what? Yes, I get that this is the classic approach and on paper it kind of works. But in reality, it's like putting a scooter engine on a camper and trying to drive it into the mountains. Even on flat water with absolutely no wind, these little engines are working themselves to death, especially if the boat is loaded. And if you've got 8 tourists on board, a couple of paddle boards, a few cases of wine, a water maker, air tanks, maybe some kind of hydro box, and you yourself are already full after a good lunch, well, that's it. You might as well hang the sails like decorative flags and get ready for a half hour just to get up to speed. By the way, in the past, boats of this size would easily be fitted with 29 horsepower engines, and the boat would at least move somehow. Now, the only option offered is engines with 37.5 horsepower. And to be honest, that's not really an option, it's an absolute necessity. And by the way, can someone please explain to me, clueless as I am, why, for example, they don't put the same small engines on the 42? I mean, what's the point here, really? Where's the logic? I also tried to find at least some logical explanations why they decided to save so much on horses in Bali. Like maybe the sails are supposed to make up for it? But no, guys, I've sailed on this boat myself, and the reviews online all say the same thing. The Catspace's sails work, but they're not miraculous. It's not light, it's not fast, and it doesn't like tacking. This isn't some outremmer or even an old Lagoon 380. It's a house on the water that only moves when you really persuade it to. And trying to persuade it without the right engines is like having a conversation about politics with a refrigerator. So my honest advice is, if you've ever seriously or genuinely planned to leave the marina in less than perfect conditions, then you should definitely choose to go for the version with 37.5 horsepower. Yes, it's more expensive. Yes, it's heavier, but at least you won't feel helpless if there's suddenly a current, a headwind, or if you need to dodge, say, a boat coming toward you. By the way, under normal conditions, even with the stock engines, the Catspace does 5 to 6 knots, which is honestly a solid, good cruising speed. Of course, you can push it to 8 knots, but that would be at near maximum RPMs and with fuel consumption like a truck on the highway. The engines in general are something on this catamaran that you end up using more often than you'd like. And here it's important that they're reliable and don't require any tinkering. Let's remember that for several years now, Bali has been installing engines from the French company Nanny on their catamarans, instead of the usual Yanmar or Volvo Penta. And I'll tell you honestly, at first, this personally raised some questions for me, like, who are these guys anyway? Why not tried and true Japanese or Swedish engine? But if you dig a little deeper, it's not that simple and not that bad at all. Nanny is far from a no-name brand now. They have a factory near Bordeaux, and they build their engines based on Kubota diesel engines, with their own, by the way, marine adaptation. So the engine block is reliable, Japanese, and well-known in agricultural machinery, generators, special equipment, things like that. But everything related to the marine components, cooling, sail drives, exhaust, and controls is developed by the French themselves. Why did Bali switch specifically to Nanny? Well, first of all, it's cheaper, especially considering that everything is local, without unnecessary logistics and customs. Overall, these are all advantages that might not even be mentioned if the price is good. But no. Secondly, there is standardization. Katana Group and Nanny have had an agreement for many years now, and they provide turnkey installation tailored specifically to the needs of the shipyard. In other words, it's not just an engine with a sail drive, but a fully assembled, fine-tuned package. The engine, the drive, the control panel, and everything else included. By the way, here's my advice to them. Nanny Hire, a freelance designer, no more. Please guys, have them create a mock-up of a control panel that won't ruin the appearance of the catamarans. Honestly, it's just downright ugly. In just a couple of minutes, I sketched out a few options using Midjourney. You can have them for free if you want. By the way, the reviews about these Nanny engines online are really strange. I don't know what kind of engines they are. Maybe they're Chinese, but after a year of use, I have to admit, they work like tractors and start up without any fuss. The thrust is decent and the noise is within normal limit. Don't you think that sounds like it was written by a bot? What does decent thrust even mean? And what's a normal noise level? And a year isn't any time at all for a yacht engine. On my yacht, after 45 years, it still has the same specs. It starts up instantly. I think it'll keep running like that for another 50 years, starting just as easily with the same decent thrust. By the way, I took a look, and the layout of this engine is convenient. The filters, oil, and impeller are all easily accessible and no need for acrobatics, flashlights, or any special tools. In charter operations, that's a huge advantage. The mechanic just comes in, climbs in, changes everything, and is out in half an hour redoing that with the Volvo Penta, like the one I have on my boat. There, quite often, the layout is just completely impractical. I have no idea who came up with it. To get to the fuel filter, you basically need the skills of a proctologist, seriously. And this is on expensive, high-quality boats. Now, for the downsides, the service situation isn't perfect yet. If you're somewhere like the Canaries or Croatia, you can get help with Yanmar at almost any workshop. But with Nanny, you'll have to look around. Although, if needed, you can use Kubota parts. It's not official, but essentially it's the same engine. As for noise, that's debatable too. Some say the engine compartment is well insulated and comfortable underway. Others complain about vibrations, especially when maneuvering in port. And here it's more about the fact that engines always have certain RPMs where these parasitic vibrations appear. And the weaker the engine, the more often this happens. So yes, Nandi doesn't exactly excite the public yet, but I don't see any reason to panic either. It's not some cheap product from AliExpress, but a perfectly functional solution. And to be honest, in terms of price to reliability ratio, they're no worse than the basic models from, say, Yanmar or Volvo Penta. And especially in charter, where boats pay for themselves in 5 seasons, every euro saved matters. Obviously, the engine is installed on the Catspace in the aft locker. That's classic, you might say, and you'd probably be right. But I'll still mention it, because this classic setup has its own advantages that you don't always realize until you actually start working with the boat hands-on, not just looking at brochures or videos like this one. First of all, accessibility. The aft placement isn't just for looks. It means you open the hatch, and there it is, your little diesel engine, right below everything, close at hand, everything visible. Checking the oil takes 10 seconds, glancing at the coolant another 5 seconds, changing the filter. You don't even have to crawl awkwardly through the cabin, as you might have to do on some of the older models with a central layout. And even if you're not a mechanic and actually prefer pressing buttons to turning wrenches, you'll still genuinely appreciate just how incredibly convenient and helpful this is when something inevitably gets clogged, acts up, or jumps on. It definitely will act up at some point, sooner or later. Secondly, noise and vibrations. The engines are really far back, and that's no joke. If you've ever slept on a yacht with engines installed in the middle, right under the bunk, you'll understand what I mean. Here they're as far away from the salon and cabins as possible, especially from the forward cabins. As a result, it is quieter, calmer, more comfortable, and does not shake. Well, almost no shaking. Third is cooling and ventilation. It's easier to organize good airflow at the stern. It's not a narrow engine compartment under the steps where everything heats up. Here, both the air intake and exhaust are simpler, and everything cools more efficiently. And now let's add to this engine room idyll one more very important point, which is rarely mentioned in advertising brochures, but is truly important for those who actually go out to sea, not just sit at the dock. It's the water tightness of the engine compartment. Take a look. Each engine is in its own separate locker, isolated from the rest of the catamaran's interior. This means that even if, God forbid, the cooling hose suddenly bursts, or the fuel line unexpectedly leaks, or even if the exhaust pipe ruptures, or let's say you decided to install a heat pump for the air conditioner in there as well, and something in that system bursts, then all of that, every bit of it, will stay safely contained inside the engine compartment, preventing it from spreading elsewhere. And it won't sink the boat, fill the cabin with smoke, or flood half your cabin with diesel. Of course, it's unpleasant, but it's still a localized problem, not the end of the journey as it usually is. And another plus is the drainage. Engine compartments always have their own pumps that pump out water separately from the main bilge. And that means the main hull will always stay dry even if something gets in there. And the dry hull means comfort, safety, preservation of the electrical systems, and no risk of things like osmosis. And here's where another important advantage comes in fire safety. Since the compartment is isolated, you can easily install autonomous fire suppression systems there that operate independently, even if you're in the cockpit pouring yourself a coffee and have no idea that something has gone wrong down there. Many configurations already include this feature, and don't skimp on it if you're customizing the boat for yourself. And another thing, thanks to the watertight compartments, there are fewer odors. And that's important, especially if you live on board with your family or run charters there. Well, nobody likes the smell of diesel mixed in with their morning croissant. And with this kind of layout, any odor stays right where it belongs if it even appears at all. So there you have it. Easy access, quiet, maneuverability, and most importantly, safety. And all of this is thanks to the proper aft layout and good sealing of the engine compartment. It seems obvious, but not everywhere is it implemented this neatly. And now, let's talk about the life of the captain on this boat. I mean about you and me, because we are usually the ones who spend the most time on board yet somehow remain behind the scenes. Everyone else is relaxing while you have to steer, dock the boat, charge the batteries, haul water jugs, and keep an eye on everything. And here, the helm station on this boat is the only one and is located on the flybridge right at the top, out in the open air, next to the sails and all the sheets. On the one hand, it's kind of great, you can see everything, the boat, the stern, the dock, the neighbors, you have full control. And when docking, that really does help, but being fully involved in the social scene isn't really part of the deal. And after all, the boat was designed by its creators to be a family and friends-oriented vessel. And maybe someone will drop by to see you, but they'll definitely leave after about 20 minutes because there's no canopy over the helm as standard. By the way, that's one of the most common complaints in owner reviews. Someone bought the boat in Turkey and by the end of the first week they already looked like a boiled lobster. Yes, I understand myself that living on a boat like this without a canopy is pretty tough. A canopy is a must-have. No matter how much you want to save money at first, you'll end up buying one anyway, or you'll damage your skin. There's just no other option. Now, about the flybridge itself, yes, it's kind of there and it seems cool. A separate space, a third cockpit, a little sofa, a table you can even throw some cushions around and have a chill evening. But unlike the larger Bali models, there isn't a full-fledged lounge here. It's more of a captain's area plus an optional sofa. For relaxing, it's fine, especially if there are just two of you, but with a crowd, it's not quite the same. Especially considering that the canopy is optional, there's no fridge nearby, and there's nowhere to put your Aperol glass, no cup holders at all. So the flybridge here is more of a workspace than a resort-style spot, although the access to it is actually better than on the previous Bali 4.1. And most importantly, there are steps on both sides. Alright, as captains, we're always at the helm. But guests most often choose to relax at the bow, because in Bali, unlike many others, there's a real bow cockpit. And this space is a magnet for the whole boat crew. People bring pillows there, all sorts of cocktails, Bluetooth speakers. People rush there to watch the sunset, and that's also where they fall asleep with a book on their face or with a phone lying nearby. Now let's talk about the actual controls. All the running rigging is led back to the helm. Controlling the mainsail and the jib is really done from a single spot. And there's a single electric winch. It's convenient, especially for chartering. You set the jib, pull out the mainsail, and off you go. But if you want to play around with the settings, sorry, this isn't your boat. Everything here is minimal, no carriages for you, no possibility to adjust the sails to specific conditions. The boat is made so the sail is just kind of hoisted so it looks good in Instagram photos. And that's it. Now, about the electronics. Here, everything is simple and, most importantly, honest. Raymarine usually comes with heavy Bali. The chart plotter is either 7, 9 or 12 inches. Autopilot, anemometer, depth sounder, you can order a radar, forward scanner or a second salon display. All instruments are at the helm, that's definitely a plus. However, in some reviews people mention that the screen glares, so they have to cover it with a towel or look at it from an angle. Honestly, I personally don't have that problem at all. Maybe it depends on your eyesight, mine has always been 100%. Raymarine is already a truly tried and tested brand. The interface is user-friendly, responds quickly, you can rotate the map with your fingers just like on an iPad, and honestly there's almost nothing that needs explaining. The autopilot on this boat performs even better than you might expect. Yes, it's not some high-end linear drive like on expensive expedition catamarans, but it does its job well, holds the course steadily, and even in waves it keeps the course stable. But of course, all within reasonable limits. A strong wave can throw it off. I read a review from an owner who was delivering this Catspace from Biscay to Sicily, and he said the autopilot worked perfectly. Even in 20-knot winds, the boat didn't wander off course at all. It went straight, like on rails. As for me, well, I have my own personal experience. There too, the boat never wandered or got thrown off by the autopilot even once, even though the winds were up to 15 or 20 knots. To be honest, though, the steering feels a bit mushy. You don't really feel a direct connection, even though it seems to have a direct mechanical drive. But unfortunately, that's nothing new for modern charter catamarans, especially the larger ones. It's always like that here. Many of them even use hydraulic steering. All in all, Raymarine is a practical choice for this catamaran. They have a real Sea-Talk bus, and it works reliably, integrating smoothly with any other devices. Want a radar? No problem. Here you go, for example, the Quantum 2. Want a second display? You can just throw in, say, a Xiaomi 7 from the salon, for instance, and all of it works together without any hassle at all. You can easily install a camera on the stern and get a rear view while docking. It's convenient, basically. The steering wheel, again, I'll repeat, is a standard mechanical one. The response, well, let's just say it's there. With a 12-knot wind on a beam ridge, you're going 6 knots and you can steer with your foot while sipping coffee. But forget about sailing close to the wind, especially if there are waves. The boat jumps, loses its course, and requires constant corrections. Nothing dangerous, but nothing pleasant while underway either. Both rudders are classically connected by a metal rod, and without external force can't get out of sync at all. Well, unless a whale bites it off for you. Yes, on the Catspace, the rudders are in front of the propellers. Previously, I thought this was, to put it mildly, a questionable decision. I used to wonder, how could that be? Why put them there where it seems like they would be of minimal use? After all, logic suggests that the propeller should blow onto the rudder, not the other way around. That's how it's done, for example, on motor catamarans, where during maneuvers in the marina, the rudder helps you turn literally on a dime. But here is the opposite. But just the other day, during a rather tight docking, I had an epiphany. I realized that this isn't a mistake, but a clever compromise. By placing the rudders in front of the propellers, the Bali engineers are essentially saying, guys, this isn't a sports boat, not a racing catamaran. This is a cruiser for laid-back enjoyment. But with these rudders, you get better handling. Well, under sail, the response is a bit quicker. The farther away they are, the less maneuverability you get, but the more feel you have. And all of this is especially effective when there are slight heeling angles like this. Additionally, there's less cavitation because the turbulence from the propeller doesn't hit the rudder directly. This is particularly noticeable when sailing under both sail and engine, where steering becomes smoother, the boat holds its course more confidently, and the autopilot makes fewer corrections. And honestly, even in the marina with two propellers, when you're maneuvering under engine power, you still have the ability to turn the catamaran in place simply by using opposing thrust. Different RPMs and you're already turning. In short, it's not wrong. It's just a different approach, one that you start to appreciate when you stop expecting the boat to behave like a sports vessel and begin to value it more as a cozy sea home on wheels. So yes, I take back my doubts, not right away, but I understood in the end. Overall, the handling here is straightforward and stress-free. The boat, of course, doesn't require super skills, but it also doesn't give you the thrill of being a skipper. You don't really feel what it's like to handle a real catamaran. You're just sitting in it like in a deck chair, gently turning the wheel until you end up nose first in the next bay. It's perfect for charter. Minimal actions, maximum automation, and to be honest, I really liked one very interesting review. My mom was able to cover 40 miles on it while I slept below, and she only accidentally turned off the autopilot once. So in general, the captain here is more nominal than actually needed, but at least you don't get tired. And actually, by the way, that's not a bad thing. On the contrary, it's actually a pleasant surprise, considering the boat's lower price category. Overall, in terms of electronics and control, the Bali Catspace confidently plays in the field of comfortable chartering. Here, it's not about the passion for handling, like say on the Catsmarts, but about minimal worries and maximum automation. Everything is simple, everything is logical, nothing scares off beginners, everything is clear. And at the same time, Bali doesn't skimp on any of the basic things. Well, for example, Raymarine is no longer just a marketing gimmick, it's the standard. Now let's take a closer look at the layouts, lighting and bathrooms. After all, it's these very details that make everyday life on board either comfortable or turn it into a series of compromises. The Bali Catspace offers several layout options, the most popular of which are the 4-cabin version with 4 bathrooms and the owner's version with 3 cabins. In the latter, the entire port hull is dedicated to a spacious master cabin with a separate bathroom, which makes it especially attractive for long cruises and living aboard. By the way, I've noticed that the owner's cabin is always placed in the hull opposite the helm station. I don't know why, but it seems right to me. A captain will intuitively dock side to, using the side that he can see. And of course the side he can see is the one where the helm is located, which is on the starboard side. But maybe it's just a coincidence. Interestingly, in the forward cabins, the beds are arranged across the hull, which allows for maximum use of space and provides comfortable access from both sides. In the aft cabins, however, the beds are of the island type, which also offers convenience and storage space underneath. Well, that's what it says in the brochure. But I'll tell you my own dissatisfaction with this solution. But first, as always, some context. The Bali Catspace does not have a door from the saloon to the forward cockpit, even though there seems to be enough space for one. Now the question is, why? It seems convenient. You open the door and step right out into the forward cockpit or to the anchor. In more expensive models like the 4.2 and above, there is such a door, but here there isn't, and this decision, it seems, is not accidental. My hypothesis is this: it's marketing segmentation. And so that the more expensive models don't compete with the lower ones, just imagine if the Catspace offered the same functionality for the same price. Why would anyone buy the 4.2 then? Exactly, there would be no reason. That's why they removed the door. But there's also a technical nuance. It's those very transverse beds in the bow that I just mentioned. Because of their orientation, there's simply nowhere to install a door there, there's no proper passageway, and everything is already quite cramped. Cabinets, walls, steps. With longitudinal beds like everyone else has, you can just make a passage in the center, but here it's impossible. And here it's unclear, is it marketing dictating the layout, or did they first design the layout with transverse beds supposedly more spacious and only then say, well, okay, now the door doesn't fit. And at the same time, they built a product line around this idea. In any case, the absence of this door is a small but definite drawback, especially when it's raining and you need to quickly get from the stern to the bow whether you like it or not. You have to go outside and jump across the wet deck. From a safety perspective, well, it's not great either. If something happens at the front, like with the anchor or a sail flapping, you can only get there by going all the way around. And at night, with the waves, that's no joke. I know all the seasoned yachtsmen will probably laugh at me now, but there are also catamaran cruisers who like to sail in comfort. And now, with all this knowledge, I'll say it again, I don't like island-style beds, and I don't like this transverse layout in the forward cabins. At first glance, it seems great a large area, a room to move around in the cabin, almost like at home, but in practice, I start to notice the nuances. For me, there are a few more pretty strong arguments. First of all, you literally have to climb into this kind of bed. It's also impossible to just sit down on it, and the ceilings above it are low, which is already uncomfortable when you've chosen to relax specifically on a catamaran, especially if you're tall like me. Next, there's the rocking. I'm not saying that the Bali handles waves poorly or anything like that. No, it's actually quite normal. But specifically in the forward cabins with the transverse bed, you feel even a slight rocking differently. Maybe because of the position of the hull, or maybe because of the orientation of your body. But it feels as if you're being gently rocked from side to side, like in a hammock. It doesn't make you very seasick, but personally it annoys me, especially at night and especially when you're at anchor and the boat is rocking along the hulls. This is the kind of motion you get. It's the same effect as on a monohull. And finally, the partition between two such cabins is actually quite sound permeable. For young couples vacationing together, just a heads up, you'll have to synchronize. But there are also advantages. This layout made it possible to have individual and fairly spacious bathrooms. This is where you really feel the spirit of cruising hedonism, when every crew member not only has their own berth, but also their own actual private sitting corner, where you can retreat and ponder the eternal. Those who have sailed on older catamarans will especially appreciate this. On those boats, there could actually be just one toilet for 4 cabins, and even that one had a magnetic latch and a view of the galley. In the owner version, we have a full-fledged master bathroom. The entire bow area with a shower, partitions, and enough space not only to turn around, but even, forgive me, to stand there together. Well, in case a romantic mood suddenly strikes. In the charter version, there are 4 bathrooms for 4 cabins. That's already generous by charter fleet standards. For example, the Cat Smart doesn't have that, and each unit, although not huge, still has a shower, a toilet, and separate zones. Another thing that was pleasing was the plastic. Everything can be washed, nothing rots, there are no strange specific corners with wooden inserts where mold could grow or something could swell, get stuck, or catch on something. And believe me, that kind of thing does happen. Designers can come up with anything. Everything is simple, functional, and designed so that even after 10 years in charter, it will still look almost brand new, not like a train station restroom. Yes, there are some drawbacks. Ventilation in the bathrooms is only through a hatch, no automatic exhaust fans, no vent. So either open the hatch or suffer. But overall it's quite decent. There's none of that cramped shower cabin feeling you get in some narrow Japanese hotel. Everything is rational with the right angles and enough height. And most importantly, no one else is sharing this whole experience with you. And here, Bali really gets it right. They've already picked up on the trend that personal space is now valued more than a glossy dinghy on a cabinet door. Like water tanks and access to the valves on this catamaran are in line with the latest trends in modern yacht building, or more precisely, modern bathroom design. Here, Bali is clearly trying to show that they're on top of things. First of all, black water tanks are no longer an option as they used to be. They're now part of the standard equipment, which means there won't be any issues entering countries where this is mandatory. And this is not just a matter of hygiene or MARPOL regulations, for example, but also simply about human comfort. Secondly, access to the systems has been made as reasonable as possible. Valves, hoses, and T-sol are located in hatches under the sinks or under the floorboards, but overall it's quite convenient. In addition, they've started marking the valves and taps with colored stickers. And here I have to give them a round of applause, because before, to figure out where to shut off the water, you had to go on a quest like find the blue hose among 5 blue hoses. Now everything is labeled, visible, and clear in short. When it comes to access and organization of the plumbing, Bali is offering not just the yacht minimum, but almost a home level standard. And for that they get a like. Now let's talk about lighting and ventilation. One of the main advantages of the Catspace is the abundance of natural light. Large windows in the salon and cabins create a sense of spaciousness and let you enjoy the views. In addition, the presence of opening hatches and portholes ensures good ventilation. And that's especially important, particularly where we live in a warm climate. Of course, it's very interesting how they've designed a large forward opening window in the salon. It turns the area between the galley and the forward cockpit into a sort of makeshift bar counter. It's truly an interesting solution. Otherwise, as with all Bali catamarans, there's a lot of light in every room, but no natural ventilation when the catamaran is completely closed up. Again, I want to emphasize the importance of ventilation mushrooms. They really matter. Although designers really dislike them, of course they do spoil the exterior appearance. So in this regard, Bali loses out to Lagoon for me. But as I say, when you're out on the water, you open the hatch, put up a mosquito net, and everything's fine. But when it comes to storing the boat, well, I have some questions about what will happen to it, how it might start to rot. Now let's talk about what users are saying. Because no matter what Bali's marketers write, or what reviewers like me might think, real user feedback puts everything in its place. And I love digging through these reviews, not just to get the general opinion, but also to understand who is actually writing them. Is it an owner who has been living on board for the 3rd season already? Or is it someone who just rented the boat for a week and all they remember is pouring themselves mojitos, partying on the foredeck, and all the reviews are about that? So let's start with the owners. I especially like one Frenchman. His name is Jean-Marc, and he has a 2022 Bali Catspace, which he uses personally, not for charter. He always posts on the Catamarans owner forums. There's a French forum by that name. Here's what he wrote. Overall, the boat is like a big terrace by the sea. And I think this description is very accurate. He is pleased with the layout, the lighting, and the way his wife set up the kitchen, but at the same time, he honestly admits that under sail, the boat behaves rather sluggishly, especially if the wind is less than 12 knots. And in his words, this is not a catamaran for racing at all, it's a catamaran for having an aperitif at anchor. The summary can be roughly this: if you're not in a hurry, everything is wonderful. If you are in a hurry, then get a motorboat, for example. Next, let's talk about charterers. Here, there are significantly more opinions, for example, on Nautol or Clickboat. And also just on forums like Cruisers Forum, a typical review sounds exactly like this. Very comfortable, lots of space, everyone is happy. And then it goes something like, in the heat, the air conditioner barely copes, or under sail, it was disappointing. One German wrote that he liked how the boat handles a beam reach in waves. There was a negative review about how the boat handles a beam reach in waves. For example, someone wrote that the boat splashes around like a duck. That's almost a direct quote, but at the same time, everyone unanimously says that the boat is perfect when at anchor. The space, the layout, the fridge, the sofas, the windowsill get top marks. This was written by journalist Sam Jeffers. From his point of view, for the charter business, the boat offers the most when at anchor and the least when underway. Of course, that's not exactly a revelation, but it does confirm the overall picture. And now, the last example, Multi-Hull's World. By the way, read this magazine if you enjoy such reviews, because in their review, they even praised the sailing performance of this catamaran. But personally, I still couldn't figure out whether they were actually out at sea or if they were just rewriting Bali's press release. Because all the praise sounded like mild comments about the steering, being responsive, good visibility from the bridge, and convenience when docking. Well, you get that they clearly haven't actually been on this catamaran. Further speed. Real reviews give honest numbers, 5 to 6 knots under sail in moderate winds, somewhere around 12 to 14 knots. In ideal conditions, well, you can squeeze out 7.5. Under motor, you can go 7 to 8 knots, but it's noisy and not economical. Again, it's not surprising, but several owners specifically complained about vibrations at speeds above 2,200 RPM. I think those were exactly the RPMs, around 2,200, 2,300. And this shows that soundproofing and balancing are clearly not a priority for Bali, or more precisely, not a priority for this combination of Bali and a small engine. In short, to sum it up, the Bali Catspace is a boat you book for the anchorage, not for the journey. And that's the whole point. This is a yacht where comfort only begins after you've docked. Let's get back to the technical aspects. When it comes to electrics and lighting, the Bali Catspace has a rather modest basic package, but it's very well thought out, and everything you need is included in the standard version. It comes with navigation lights, anchor lights, running lights, deck lighting, and lights in the saloon and cabins basic, but again, enough lighting for comfortable living on board. A 12-volt system, fans in every cabin, and the most basic batteries, two 130 amp-hour service batteries and two 110 amp-hour starter batteries. Of course, this will cover all the main systems, but what more you can get out of them, I honestly don't know. The charger is supposedly 40 amp-hours again, but what they actually install, I don't know. There are cigarette lighter sockets, 12-volt and USB outlets in the saloon and cabins. However, if you're planning truly long autonomous passages, then it's really worth considering additional options. An inverter is not included as standard, and there are no solar panels either, which I would highly recommend. There are also no extra 220-volt outlets for convenience. The power management system is basic, but you really need to install one that allows you to monitor all electricity consumption and optimize the operation of all systems. In the reviews of this catamaran, I didn't find any complaints about the electrical system at all. This is absolutely true. In general, I even strongly recommend chartering exactly the model you like, with precisely the options you want to install, and not using any other options that are available but that you don't actually plan to buy or use, so you can really figure out whether you'll actually be comfortable with it and whether you truly need those specific options. Taking this careful approach can help ensure. Again, feel free to write to me, I'll help and advise you on which options are worth ordering from the shipyard and which ones you can add yourself. Overall, the Bali Catspace is a functional and affordable catamaran for family trips or for charter business, although if you look at the finances, things aren't quite as rosy as you might hope. And before I start talking about them, I want to say that with this boat, I deliberately saved all the technical terms like infusion, sandwich, balsa, vacuum, and all those polyester resins for the end. Because honestly, everyone pretty much does the same thing. Of course, every manufacturer will tell you how their product is cooler, thicker, lighter, stiffer, and more durable. But unless you go around with a micrometer or do a crash test by ramming the hull into a breakwater, the difference for the average user will be minimal. Let's go through it step by step. The hull is made from classic polyester resin. The sandwich structure inside is made of thermoformed foam. This is the industry standard today. Some might say, well, polyester is cheap and not very respectable, but let's be honest, vinyl ester increases the production cost by at least 50%. Epoxy is in a whole different league altogether, and you're getting a boat for leisure, not for racing, like the America's Cup. So the choice is actually quite rational. What matters is not what it's made of, but how it's made. And this is where things get really interesting. Most manufacturers join the hull along the bridge deck at the center. And this is the spot where, in rough seas and under impact loads, the hull experiences the greatest deformation. But Bali took a different approach. The entire upper part, including the deck, cockpit, and even the bow section, is made as a single element, and the joint is moved down, there to the side hull. Then they literally put this helmet-like top onto the hull, and this kind of assembly adds extra rigidity to the whole structure. Again, fewer seams mean fewer weak points and greater overall solidity. And of course, this doesn't mean that the boat becomes indestructible. As always, it's a compromise, the rigidity is higher, but there may be other nuances in how the load is distributed. In theory, you need to calculate model and so on. How will it behave? How will the hull respond to torsion, to bending, and especially when all of this is done without a central forward beam. But so far, practice shows that the boat sail, they don't crack, and they hold up both in charter and in private hands. And that means that, at least for now, the engineering approach has worked. So if you look past the marketing slogans and focus on the essence, Catspace isn't about being cheaper, it's about being smarter. And perhaps that's the main advantage of all Bali boats, their entire lineup. That's all I have to say about the hull. Next, let's talk about money. So if you decide to buy Bali Catspace, then a reasonably equipped boat for cabins, Raymarine electronics, air conditioning, solar panels, generator, dinghy with a proper engine, and a canopy so you don't get burned on the flybridge. All of that will cost you somewhere around 550,000, but that's without VAT. If you include VAT and go through the process without any legal schemes, it'll be about 660 to 680. And that's already a serious amount. I understand there's another way to register it through a charter company under a flag without VAT, with preferential customs clearance and all that. In that case, you can keep it within the same 550. You just pay part of that for maintenance and legal support, but you save a lot on taxes. Now, about the secondary market, for around 350 to 400,000, you can find a boat from 2020 to 2022. Such years already exist. But almost certainly, it has been used in charter all this time, which means the cables are stretched, the halyards are frayed, the railings rattle, the sails are well worn out, obviously. The faucets might leak, the water lines too, the hatches don't stay in place, the shock absorbers, all of this will need to be checked. None of this is a big deal, but be prepared to throw in another 20 to 30,000 or so to get everything in order, especially if you plan to sell it yourself or if you'll be doing the work yourself. And now, the most interesting part, ask yourself, why do you even need this boat? If it's just for you and your family, then consider it purely an expense. And here, I'm definitely not the one to give advice. Everyone has their own quirks. But if you want it to pay for itself, let's throw out a couple of options. So option one, you rent it out for charter through a management company, in a good location with a good company and decent occupancy. The income is about 70 to 100,000 euros per season. That's net after commission and all maintenance costs. To get an exact calculation, you'd need to sit down and crunch the numbers for specific regions, but for now, these particular catamarans are showing the best occupancy rate. The payback period is about 6 to 10 years, and you can sell the boat for the price you paid. Next, option two. You're the captain and rent it out by the cabin. The income, if you work on board and organize everything yourself, is about 140 to 170,000 euros, depending on the region. If you subtract the expenses which you have, you earn a bit less naturally. Let's talk about the expenses. Insurance is around 3,500 to 4,000 per year. Mooring costs 6,000 to 10,000. Then maintenance is 5,000 to 8,000. Minor repairs 3,000 to 5,000. Administrative costs like flag registration, accounting, and so on, another 1,000 to 2,000. And again, you're always in the black. That is, you control the condition of the boat, live on board, spend less, and your housing expenses are lower. But there are also downsides. You work a real job with no days off during the season, and you'll have to keep smiling even if you're seasick. In short, you have to weigh it yourself and decide if it's really worth it. And the third option is day chartering. The income, if it's a good region like the Balearic Islands or the French Riviera, can be anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 euros per day, with the season again lasting from 90 to 120 days. By the way, our season has already started even though it's only May. So the result, 100 to 200,000 euros gross. About 20% of that will go towards fuel, crew, food, wine, mooring fees, and everything else. In short, the expenses are the same. The remainder could be, 150,000 per year. And again, this is active work and you need a good website, booking system, partners and licenses. Conclusion. If you want a house on the water that you occasionally rent out to friends and use for family vacations, then consider it just like that cottage in the mountains or a villa in Mallorca, indulgence with expenses. But if you want to run a business, then the most profitable way is not to hand it over to a charter company, but to operate it yourself, do the work with your own hands and develop the project from scratch. YouTube, your own website, booking platforms, you handle everything yourself. Only then will the boat start generating real profit. But if you're hoping to just put it into a charter and have it all work out on its own, well, that only makes sense if you just want to try living the maritime lifestyle. The investment will pay off, but just not as quickly as in other areas. I've generally noticed that people tend to overestimate the investment projects they get involved in. At the same time, the boat they buy most often meets their own needs, not the needs of the market. Now, I do understand that Bali catamarans, for example, are less prone to this issue, but still keep in mind, a commercial project is not the same as I'll buy a boat for myself and make some money on the side. You have to accept this and live with it. And now, at this point, let's start drawing at least some conclusions. If you look at the Bali Catspace and compare it, say, to its younger brother, the Bali Catsmart, the conclusions become obvious. These two boats are like two siblings related by blood, but very different in character. One is a bit more serious, meant for families with children, that's the Catspace. The other has charisma, designed for sporty types who take their friends on adventures, and that's the Catsmart. The second one is clearly cheaper, and you'll make significantly less money with it. Well, unless of course you're an athlete yourself. So in the end, the choice between them isn't really about which one is better or worse. It's more a question of what you need it for. If you need space, comfort, and the ability to live on board for weeks, go for the Catspace. If you want excitement, maneuverability, and speed under a Cat Zero rating, then the Catsmart is your choice. Although, to be honest, I started this whole final comparison just so you'd realize it's not all about size. The real question is, what did the designers have in mind, and does that match what you personally want? In my opinion, I'd put it this way. If you need a boat to cruise around the Balearic Islands, throw parties, live like you're in an apartment on the water and not worry about a thing, then this is the one. The Catspace is all about comfort, about just getting on and going. This is exactly my kind of boat. For beginners, it's an absolute gift. You can reef the sails with the push of a button, set the sails with one hand, and the bathroom is just like at home. It's perfect for charter and fantastic for families with kids. But if you want to actually sail, not just stay put, then it will always be a compromise. On a close hold course, it's a bit sluggish, noisy on the waves, and its durability is about the same as any Bali. But you get to sit in the saloon with a 360-degree panoramic view, or up on the flybridge, sipping coffee, watching the sunset, and you realize it was all worth it. Everything else just comes down to personal taste. And I'm no help here. See you next time.